afternoon.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining RPI's annual Winter Webinar Series. Our next topic is Change Management for Project Sponsors, presented by myself, Daniel Schnapp, and my change management partner in crime, Sarah Concannon. We have some really cool slides to share with you today, starting with the role of sponsor in change management. Next, we'll move into why you as a sponsor are uniquely important in the success of change initiatives. We then learn that no sponsor is on an island, with the Beatles-inspired "I Get By with a Little Help from My Friends" section. And finally, wrap up with a conclusion and some closing thoughts.
You can, of course, see us here on the screen, but we'll take a second and introduce ourselves. So you can go first, Daniel.
Thank you, Sarah. Of course, my name is Daniel Janab. I am a change manager here at RPI Consultants. I am a ProSci certified change practitioner. I received my master's degree in communications management from George Washington University. And a little fun fact about myself, I am the resident fitness geek at RPI's Kansas City office. And remember, folks, a personal health check is just as important as a technical solution health check.
I feel like you're trying to start a side hustle here. This is me. I'm Sarah Concannon. I am also a ProSci certified change practitioner. I've been with RPI for almost 6 years now. Spent some time in project management. I'm a little bit of a jack of all trades. Really enjoying change management that I've been doing for the last few years. I hail from Chicago and I have 3 kids. And I will be doing another webinar later this week on creativity. So check that out. A little bit of a deviation from our work topics, an opportunity to explore areas of interest with some of our other RPI colleagues. And just, get a little extracurricular knowledge as part of this winter webinar series. So we're excited to be incorporating those this time around.
And fun fact about Sarah's creativity, she actually led a RPI wine and canvas event. Sarah is definitely the resident artist. And if you are impressed with the aesthetics of this presentation, please know that it was entirely her.
And if you're not, you can keep it to yourself. All right, so first, we just want to level set. Let's define change management. So we're operating from a shared definition. When we're talking about change management, we are talking about changes that impact people, not technology. So your project may very well have both, but this type of change management shouldn't be confused with what might also be referred to as change control. So changing, a system or some aspects of functionality or some development. We're really just talking about changes that impact people here. And specifically, change management is the processes, tools, and techniques that we use to manage the people side of organizational change in order to help achieve the desired business outcomes that got you into whatever your project is in the first place. So as a sponsor, you're probably most keenly focused on the business outcomes that are driving your project or initiative, and which will likely be used as part of determining your project's success. That's totally understandable, but it can sometimes result in a cut to the chase mentality. Some sponsors see change management as just some, noise that might be a little bit helpful, but isn't really necessary, or at worst, is maybe something that's going to interfere with getting your project done. I'm assuming that you all who are joining us for this webinar don't fall into that category since you're here attending a webinar about your influence on change management as sponsor. But in case we have some skeptics among us, the key takeaway here is that you can't achieve those business outcomes that you're going for as quickly or as fully as possible without managing those people impacts along the way. It's not that you can't get there at all, but it will likely be slower, or you'll fail to like fully achieve those goals. You might fall a little bit short of reaching that full potential of your project objectives. So that's something that should really resonate with our project sponsors. So next up, we're going to talk about the specific role of sponsor in change management. We have our nice subtitle here of "With great power comes great responsibility." You know, your position in change management and in the project overall is really important. And that's it's a big part of what you're here to learn about today. So we thought we would start out talking about your role in the context of its relationship to other roles involved in change management on a project. It's always nice to begin with a little bit of context. So here we have our stakeholder pyramid, which I'm sure a lot of you are pretty familiar with. Up at that very tippity top of the triangle, we have leading. In some other versions of the triangle, you might see it referred to as driving. That's you. That's where you live on the project. You are directly impacted in some ways by the change, most likely, and you have some change process responsibilities, but primarily this tier is expected to lead the implementation, of the change at a strategic level. If we move one down to owning here, sometimes that's also referred to as advocating. Here, we might be talking about like department directors who are involved or managers. They have some direct responsibilities for the change process and some direct impacts as well. These folks should really be focused on facilitating the change process through support, encouragement, and leveraging their influence. And then we move to the middle here. And really, we're looking at the project team when we talk about contributing or participating. This is really where they come into play. So they will be required to change some aspect of what they do in their role or how they do it. And then the bottom two, we're mostly talking about not direct impacts from the change and kind of needing their support or just wanting them to understand. So we have endorsing, sometimes also referred to or labeled at this level as willingness. We want them, you know, maybe to assist in some parts of the process, but they wouldn't be directly impacted. And then the bottom is understanding, because it's preferable that these folks are aware of the change and know what's going on. We want them to be informed, but they're not directly participating or directly impacted. So that's where you live here at the very top of this triangle. But you're not alone there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But you know, for the overall context, you're the tip of the spear here, and that's a big part of why you're so important.
And something interesting to note is that the role sponsors play in change, their leading role, is really not an incredibly well understood role. According to a ProSci research survey released in their 2014 Best Practices in Change Management edition, and for those of you who don't know, ProSci is the gold standard change management body of knowledge, and of course, all RPI change managers are ProSci certified. But their survey says that nearly 50% of project sponsors have a less than adequate understanding of their role in change. And even a little over 5% rated themselves as not understanding it at all. And when you're the tip of the spear, as we saw in the stakeholder pyramid, that's a problem. When the tip is blunt, it doesn't work. And this is something that Sarah and I hope to address in our upcoming slides by showing not just why you as a sponsor are so uniquely important to change, but what the potential support for your role looks like.
Absolutely. So that brings us into ADKAR for sponsors. So the ADKAR model comes from ProSci. For any of you who aren't familiar with it, it is 5 sequential change milestones, essentially, that someone needs to move through successfully to get from the current state through the transition phase to their future state. And it's really just a nice framework, a way to look at working through that change and kind of assigning different activities that you may be able to match up with these milestones to help remove barriers and just ensure a smooth and successful transition. So for most sponsors, sponsorship is not their primary job responsibility. It is an important one, but it is not, you're not a full-time project sponsor. You are assigned as sponsor because you're seen as capable. You have the right level of influence. People believe that you will be able to lead a particular initiative or project to success. But, like we have all seen, I'm sure, with moving people up from functional roles into management, they've earned a promotion, they've earned that level of responsibility, but they don't necessarily have the skills that they gained in that functional role to apply to being a good manager. The nature of it is really different. And so we're kind of looking at a similar thing when we talk about, an executive level individual, no matter how, change competent and capable and intelligent and, all the rest of the wonderful things that we could say about you, no matter how great you are, most of the rest of your job is not focused around sponsorship activities. So it's really important that we acknowledge that becoming a sponsor and becoming a good and effective sponsor, especially when it comes to change management, requires a change from the sponsor. So this is like a meta change within a change sort of thing that we have going on here, right? There's change associated with your project, but also you are having to change because your expectations within this role are different than what you're doing for the rest of your regular day-to-day job. So let's talk through this ADKAR model when it comes to becoming a good sponsor in change management. We start with awareness. First of all, this is just about understanding the need to be a good sponsor. Why does it make a difference? So that's definitely a big part of what we're answering here in this webinar today. We really should be giving you a pretty good awareness. And, you probably came into today already having formed some basic awareness of sponsor importance to success, and that's why you're here. Desire is that next milestone. Desire for sponsors usually follows pretty quickly and easily from awareness. So once you understand the need, we find that folks at the sponsor level kind of automatically want to fill that need, and that's great. So we usually don't have to work too much on desire with our sponsors. Once you've gained that awareness and accepted it, your desire is just kind of a natural conclusion to want to fulfill that role in a way that will aid success for the project. Knowledge is where we really see the big gap for sponsors, and we're going to try to help you with some of that today. This kind of feeling of, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to do it. I'm aware that I need to do it well, and that it's important that I do that, but I don't really understand the specifics. What is doing a good job at this look like for me? Then we move on to ability. Typically not actually a big challenge once we get over that knowledge hurdle. Once you know the things that you need to be doing, these are all things that you are definitely going to be capable of doing. So that ability is not really a challenge for the most part. The only exception to that comes up when we have what I've heard pro-sci folks refer to as capacity barriers. So that's, technically you're able to do this thing, but you have no bandwidth. Maybe you're experiencing a lot of change saturation, or you just really don't have the time and the resources to follow through on those activities. So those are concerns about being overwhelmed, having competing priorities, suffering from change fatigue, or what have you. So we'll touch on some ways to address that in a few minutes here. And then the last one that R in ADKAR is reinforcement. So this is about, when it comes to sponsors, this is really about seeing or hearing the impacts that your sponsorship is having, and it makes it easier to sustain your active and visible engagement in the project. So, you know, you're human beings just like the rest of us. You need encouragement in that change. You need to get feedback, especially positive feedback, to see that, you know, your efforts to be a good sponsor are having the desired impact, and that you should keep going. You know, none of us are robots, and we're not immune to needing to feel like we're doing a good job and to get feedback on how we're acting in our roles, whether that's in our day-to-day work or on a project.
Yeah, and I think just to wrap up that ADKAR slide, it's really important to keep in mind that the change journey is not just for your employees, but for you as well. It's putting your own oxygen mask on first before putting on somebody else's.
Our favorite analogy, or at least one of my favorite analogies.
Sarah uses that analogy a lot on our projects.
I do. So when we talk about, okay, what does it look like to be a good sponsor? At the highest level, we talk about sponsorship ABCs. So this is another kind of model or framework that comes from ProSci. And the ABCs here, A stands for active and visible participation throughout the project. B is referring to building a coalition of sponsorship. We'll get into those details a little bit further on. And C is communicating support for the change. So these are really the foundational elements of your responsibilities as a good project sponsor when it comes to change management. That active and visible participation part really can't be underestimated. Involving the change management team in decision-making processes when appropriate is a great way to be active and visible. You want to form and maintain a strong working relationship with those folks. Be there for the stakeholders affected by the change. You know, not everybody will be thrilled about the changes or their impacts, but it's part of your responsibility to listen to and respect those impacted groups. I think that makes a big difference. We've probably all been involved in projects, where we feel like nobody really knows or cares about what's going on with the little guy, you know, and you feel like the little guy. And when you receive that recognition and communication from your sponsor, a little goes a long way there. It really has a meaningful impact for folks. You know, so we just want to point out that distancing yourself or dismissing their perspectives is not management, and it will not help them to transition successfully into the future state. So it can be hard to listen to negative feedback, and it can be tempting to ignore resistance in the hopes that it will just go away and these people will have to change. They don't really have a choice. But again, if you want to achieve those business outcomes that you're looking for as fully and quickly as possible, you need everybody on board. You want to make sure that you're present for key events and meetings. Show your face. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Active and visible participation. Just show up. Be there and be obviously engaged. You need to act as the trusted messenger for communications about organizational change. ProSci research tells us that the most effective messenger for communications concerning organizational level change is the sponsor. When it comes down to personal impacts, impacts to someone's specific role, that preferred messenger is that individual's or team's manager. But when we're talking big picture, you are the preferred communicator for organizational level change. We want you to be a first adopter and lead by example. The tone that you set kind of carries through to the rest of the project because you're at the tip top of that pyramid. So we need you to talk the talk and walk the walk and demonstrate a positive attitude, even through challenges that you may experience on the project. So those are really the specifics when we talk about active and visible participation throughout the project. So that's our A. When we talk about building a coalition, how do you do that? We'll talk a little bit later about how this seems to be the most challenging responsibility among the ABCs for sponsors across the board. But here we're really talking about engaging your peers and empowering other leaders in your organization to lead the change. You want to make the change a priority during steering committee meetings and while building consensus among leaders. But don't confuse this with delegating your sponsorship responsibilities to other levels of the stakeholder pyramid. That would be a mistake. We'll talk about key pitfalls later on in the presentation, and that is one of them. So we're going to get into coalition building and surrounding yourself with support in the back half of this presentation, and we'll share a little bit more about that.
And as you can see with our fun little graphic on the left-hand side of the screen, these ABCs are all building blocks, right? So by actively participating throughout the project, by building a coalition of sponsorship, that becomes easier, which makes communicating support for the project much more effective and widespread. So we'll be diving into some research about preferred senders of communication, Sarah alluded to just a little bit later in the presentation. But in short, your ability to communicate support, to directly speak to employees about the change from an organizational perspective, plays a significant role in stemming resistance to the change while simultaneously generating support for the change and therefore helping enable you to achieve those desired business outcomes. So in this section, we're going to talk about your unique importance, why you're so crucial to the success of the project. This section has the impacts that good sponsorship has on a project, pitfalls to look out for, and some consequences of poor sponsorship. And starting out with some research highlights. And this research comes from ProSci Surveys and their best practices in change management, the 11th edition. And the first and most important research highlight is that effective sponsorship is the most important factor for the outcome of change initiatives. And to put some context around this, active and visible executive sponsorship came in at #1 for being ranked as most important for achieving change initiatives, ahead actually of having a structured change management approach and having dedicated change management resources as contributors to change success. So that's right, you as sponsors are more important to the success of the project than Sarah or myself. You doing a good job as a sponsor is so much more important and will help you reach your organizational goals as opposed to having somebody like me, a change practitioner, even being involved. That's how important your role is. And all in all, having an effective sponsor was noted 4 times more often than any other contributing factor to the success of change initiatives in ProSci studies. Next, we tie it back to the C and the ABCs of sponsorship. So as Sarah said, the preferred senders of change communications are direct people managers and senior or executive level leaders. Employees prefer to hear personal impacts from their people managers, but larger project goals, organizational objectives, vision statements, how an improvement in their department means the organization as a whole is more efficient. That's the communication that they want to hear from you, the sponsor. Next, employees resist change for many reasons, right? Resistance can come from a lack of awareness, a change in role, lack of support or trust in leadership, or lack of inclusion in the change process. And when communicating, your message must be just as varied in order to address all of these potential routes, right? So it's important to share the business reasons for the change, why employees should want to participate in the change, and specific details about the change. So this next slide really covers what I was talking about previously with the success of change initiatives. And this is showing by sponsor effectiveness, what percentage of projects met or exceeded objectives. And this just really hammers home the importance of effective sponsorship. When employees rank their sponsors as very ineffective, only 29% of projects actually met or exceeded objectives. And it moves from 39% to ineffective, 57% to moderately effective, and then a massive boost of 73% of projects met or exceeded objectives with extremely effective sponsors. And again, we are going to keep hammering this home here. Your role as a sponsor is just so important to the success of change initiatives and the success of the overall project. And here's, again, another graph, a visual for you. It's the power of your voice visualized. And it's pretty stark looking at this, right? So for personal messages that concern them as individuals, employees just about only want to hear from their supervisor. A little bit from their department head, but everything else is pretty statistically insignificant. And then, of course, looking at larger organizational messages, it's coming from the top down. They're looking at you for guidance. And that's that's important to keep in mind. So we're doing this webinar for a reason, right? And Sarah, I don't know if I'd call it a superpower. I do know that change management has several superhero analogies, but research heavily indicates that organizational messaging from project sponsor is uniquely powerful and should be fully leveraged to ensure project success.
Yep, absolutely. What are we doing? Why? Why now? All of those questions are best answered by our sponsors. All right, we talked about it before. Common pitfalls to avoid. So, with great power comes great responsibility, like we said. That also means that falling for these pitfalls, or one of the classic blunders, if you will, can have an especially detrimental effect. We don't want you to feel like all of this is on your shoulders and that you are the only factor making or breaking your project success, because that's not true. And undue pressure can have negative consequences too. But we want you to be aware of specific pitfalls that we see commonly so that you can be sure to avoid them. So disappearing is the first one here. There are a lot of sponsors who, for a variety of reasons, maybe they don't understand the importance of their role, the need for them to be active and visible throughout the project. They kind of set it and forget it. You can't just attend the project kickoff, not say a word, and then effectively disappear for the rest of the project and think that that's going to go well. This kind of, all of these pitfalls are tied in one way or another to those basic building blocks of the ABCs that we're talking about. So active and visible participation, not just at kickoff and go live, but throughout the project. Don't disappear on your project team, on your stakeholders. Stick around, even if you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be doing or, how to show up perfectly. The answer to that is not failing to show up at all. We'd much rather have you showing up imperfectly and trying, but being present, letting people see you, attending events and meetings, talking about it. The second one here is underestimating. And what we're talking about here is not understanding the amount or the scope of the people-dependent change. Not all projects, we've talked about this a lot in our other webinars, Daniel and I have, not all projects require change management. You can have a project that does not require anyone to change anything in any way in order to be successful. Those projects don't need change management for the people side. We're not here to tell you that every single project that will ever be undertaken requires change management. It's just not true. When you need change management, that decision should be made based on your people-dependent return on investment in the project. How much of achieving your goals and objectives depends on people successfully changing, doing something different. Even if it's a minor difference, you need to get your arms around and understand the scope of that people-dependent success factor. And when sponsors think, well, this is just a technology change, it's not really impacting system users much at all, so I don't need to engage in change management. It's when that misalignment happens that we really kind of see the issues cropping up and projects not being as successful as they could be. I always use the example of things like, I'm even though I'm a change practitioner, I'm kind of particularly sensitive to small changes. And as Daniel mentioned, my degree is in fine art actually, and visual stuff is really very influential for me. It has a lot of impacts for me. And when Microsoft Outlook rolls out like different icons for their features in my mailbox, it throws me off for like a week. It's such a small thing, but like no one tells me the change is coming. No one tells me why it's happening. No one explains what I might need to do differently to successfully navigate through my mailbox and my email. All of those different ADKAR milestones are missing for me when Microsoft decides that our particular icon is going to look different. And that seems like such a minor thing, and it is, I acknowledge that it is. But it throws me off. It like ruins my day. So I think putting a lot of thought into understanding what the true level of change impacts are for people is a huge, important, activity for the sponsor, and it can be an enormous misstep. Nothing can make your stakeholders feel less understood and seen than just kind of brushing off something that they feel is significant. Just acting like, oh, this is a small thing, get over it. We don't need change management on this. So, a lot of companies or organizations will say, our people are our most important asset. But if you don't behave like that's true and back that up with your actions, it's just empty words. And your folks are going to respond to whether you're doing that well or poorly. Delegating with our ROUS. So what we're referring to here is when we talk about building your sponsor coalition, we're not talking about delegating out your sponsorship responsibilities to other levels of the stakeholder pyramid. Nothing is going to change the fact that your voice is the most powerful voice when it comes to talking about change at the organizational level. And you can get support with those communications. You can and should get support with all of your sponsorship responsibilities. But if you give all of them away to other folks, even if they do the best job in the world, if it's not coming from you, it's not going to be as effective. So don't fall for the temptation to kind of parcel out that work to other folks. And then the last two go together here, not talking the talk and not walking the walk. So don't be silent. Make sure that the right level of communication is coming from you. Make sure that those messages about organizational change are coming from your voice. You can get help writing them. You don't have to write them alone. You can get help, but they should be seen by project stakeholders as coming from you. And then, of course, walking the walk. You have to back up those words with actions. Otherwise, the talk falls flat. So those are our classic blunders or common pitfalls to avoid as project sponsor. And now let's talk about how to support you as the sponsor. So you are so important, and it's very important to your project success that you succeed in being a good and effective sponsor. And it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that alone. We always say the reward for good work is more work. I have yet to ever meet a sponsor who the project that we were involved in was the only thing that they had going on. You're made a sponsor because you're seen as capable, you have influence, you have leadership skills. That's going to get you a boatload of work, not just whatever project you're needing to support change management on. And no sponsor is an island. So let's talk a little bit about how you can better get by with a little help from your friends. And the foremost activity here is build that coalition. Being sponsor means you are the leader, not the only leader. So you're going to want to engage your peers across the organization to build a coalition of other senior leaders to support the change. You should not try to go it alone. There's no reason to do that. Set expectations and lead by example. This does involve effort. It does. And I think that's one of the reasons that our sponsors tend to find it to be the most challenging of those ABC sponsor requirements. But sometimes it's relatively simple things that can kind of help build this coalition organically. Make the change a priority during steering committee meetings. If you have a steering committee involved, those folks are great members of a sponsor coalition. Sometimes they kind of become that without calling it that necessarily. They just naturally know that they're a part of leading this change as well, and that they have that responsibility. So bring other leaders into the decision-making process and build consensus. Co-sponsors can lend their business influence to the cause and work closely with you to ensure strong and effective change leadership. So this coalition can also be a very stabilizing force for the project and helps reduce risk from common sponsor challenges. And when we're talking about sponsor challenges, this is not those pitfalls. We're talking about the possibility of a sponsor leaving or being replaced during the project. Hoping none of that happens to you all, but it does happen. And having a strong sponsor coalition in place means that everyone isn't being left high and dry with this enormous disruptive event. You'll be better able to have your project team manage through it and kind of reduce those risks for the project's success or failure. We could also have, an executive sponsor with capacity challenges or competing priorities, like we were talking about earlier. The sponsor coalition is like the number one solution for that. You build up this support around yourself so that you're not the only person shouldering these responsibilities and supporting change on your project and leading it strategically. And then, another sponsor challenge is sometimes the sponsor does not come from the right level in the organization's hierarchy to really effectively support the change. And, that would be through, if you're a sponsor in this position, that would be certainly through no fault of your own. But it shouldn't mean that you can't be successful and effective. It just means gathering the right folks around you to help kind of supplement and complement that misalignment. And this is something that, typically isn't really realized. No one intentionally chooses a sponsor from not the optimal level of an organization at the outset. They don't do that intentionally. So this is often something that's kind of not recognized until you're in the middle of the project. But if you have that really solid sponsor coalition around you, it doesn't need to be a huge roadblock or something that's really going to keep you from achieving success on your project. So again, just to note, please don't confuse this sponsor coalition with delegating away all of the responsibilities that you hold as sponsor. The power of your voice as messenger that we talked about earlier, empowering others to join you in leading change, is different than parceling off your role. You are not replaceable as the sponsor. Your influence cannot be replicated by somebody else farther down that stakeholder pyramid. We want to acknowledge that this coalition building might feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. It might not be something that you're excited to do. Of these sponsor ABC activities, participants in a 2019 ProSci study rated built a coalition as the responsibility with which their sponsor struggled the most to be effective. If it's any consolation, you wouldn't be alone in feeling challenged by this task, but it is a challenge worth meeting, because once you've established that sponsor coalition, it really pays dividends. This is also one area where you can definitely and should definitely seek help from your change manager or practitioner, which brings us to our other key source of sponsor support.
Yeah, I can't imagine too many people that are not already familiar with the ABCs of sponsorship wake up and go, yeah, today I'm going to build a coalition. But Sarah said, that's where we come in. And I think something that is misunderstood sometimes is that for as much as we as change managers and practitioners are on projects to help your employees, we are also here to help you by ensuring you understand exactly what it is you need to do. Nothing is more frustrating when your assistance is requested, but there isn't any guidance. There's no real blueprint for you to follow. So what Sarah and I like to do is to provide a plan of sponsor-specific actions or a communications plan with sponsor items clearly listed. Next, we aim to make it as easy as possible for you to do it. That means we work to remove any obstacles, and to use a golf analogy here, try to basically tee you up for success. What's really helped move tasks along is if Sarah or I draft up a sponsor communication, working closely with either a sponsor's executive assistant or project representative, and then tee up that draft to the sponsor for a final review for the full swing into the organization. Finally, we aim to hold you accountable for doing it because, let's be honest here, sending out a sponsor overview message about the project is usually not at the forefront of everyone's mind. But fortunately for you, it is for myself and Sarah. So our preference, sponsors calendar permitting, of course, is to have a recurring meeting reviewing change management progress and tasks, giving the vitally important role of sponsor the attention and time it deserves. And now we kind of start to move into our conclusion and takeaways section here. And checklists are fun, right? So what we're doing on this slide is we wanted to start this section out with some goals you can set for yourself, statements you can make, either with a current project or a future one. And we'd like you to ask yourself that as a sponsor, I will strive to understand my role in successful change, fulfill the ABCs of sponsorship, which, of course, active and visible engagement throughout the entire project, building that coalition of support, and communicating directly and effectively with stakeholders. Be prepared to help manage resistance, celebrate project successes, and prioritize change management. Now, we can't guarantee, of course, that even with all of these boxes checked, it will be a successful project. But as research indicates, there is a much higher likelihood of having a successful project and reaching the desired business outcomes if we achieve this checklist for success.
Sorry, talking on mute for a second there. We also have some key takeaways for you. And again, a lot of this is just reiterating points we've already been kind of emphasizing earlier in today's webinar, but your role is important and influential all project long. Don't set it and forget it. Don't launch and leave, whatever cute little phrase people use for things like this. Don't forget that if your engagement isn't visible to the people who are participating in the changes and are impacted by them, it will not count to them because they won't know it exists. Gather support in order to do it well. We've talked about how sponsors don't get to a place of being sponsors because they aren't high performers and very capable people. But unless your change is small and simple, don't make the mistake of thinking that you can high perform your way through sponsoring big impactful changes without gathering a supportive coalition around yourself. Find out what specifically is needed from you and deliver on it. It can be a challenge to translate things like engage actively and visibly into specific actions. So don't be afraid to say, what do you need me to do? Review the change management plan and ask, where are the activities, communications, and events that I'm responsible for or that I should expect to be participating in? You should really know when and how you're going to be tagged in for change management. So if you're confused about that, ask questions. Find out what people really need from you. And if it seems like those questions, aren't being answered, those answers aren't to be found, grab the right folks and see if you can develop those specifics together. Or give RPI a call and see if we can get a change manager over there to help you out. And of course, finally, communicate. Communication is really the linchpin of your success in sponsoring change. Remember that you're the preferred messenger when it comes to that top level of changes. The broad strokes connected to the ideas and factors that are driving this project and its timing, those are the things that your stakeholders need to be hearing about from you. You must be able to speak clearly and confidently to your project's vision. Why are we doing this? Why now? What benefits will it bring? Communication here is also about getting feedback on how you're doing as sponsor, being receptive to that, wanting to know throughout the change life cycle how you're doing and what kind of an impact you're having. Is your messaging effective? Are you reaching the right people? What is the perception of your engagement like among your stakeholders? Do you have ongoing communication with the other change management roles engaged on your project? Do you know how they're doing or if they are finding that there is a need for more or different sponsorship support than what was initially planned or originally put in that change management plan. Last but certainly not least, recognition and celebration are also forms of communication, and a little can go a long way there, especially when it's coming from the project sponsor. So make sure your team knows you see and appreciate the work that they're putting in to make this thing happen, celebrating milestones and accomplishments along the way, not just at go live. Sharing evidence of the benefits you all set out to attain when they begin to realize, so that your team has something tangible to feel proud of. You know, when you start to achieve those little things, celebrate them in the moment. Don't just wait for go live, because it sometimes it's a long road, you know, and you got to celebrate along the way. Finally, in conclusion, we have additional recommendations. The first is have a project vision statement and participate in its creation. So much of change management draws on the idea or ideas contained in that vision statement, and it's really a touchstone for the effort that you're leading. Ensure change management is integrated into project execution as early as possible. If it doesn't start early and it isn't baked into the project, it will feel like an afterthought and people will treat it that way. Showing support for the project includes active and visible support for change management efforts. If you're active and visible on the project, you are setting a lot of the tone for your project team and for stakeholders. Don't use it to undermine or downplay the importance of change management. You would be working against your own best interests to do that. Avoid the temptation to see resistance and challenges as a failure of change management. They are actually opportunities to bring other change management tools and activities into play. You know, complaints, resistance, all of those are giving you important pieces of information. And last but not least, familiarize yourself with who is being impacted and how. Exercise empathy with those individuals. Don't make the people doing you know, kind of the real labor and experiencing those most direct change impacts feel like the little guy that nobody cares about. Make sure that they know that you see them and that you appreciate it, you understand how they're being affected, and that you're there to really help connect those impacts to the benefits that this project or initiative is going to deliver to them.
And now we are officially into the wrap up. So first of all, thank you so much for sharing this time with us today. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation. And of course, we hope that you found it valuable in understanding the role of sponsor in change initiatives. For more information on RPI's approach to change management, please visit rpic.com. And we have two very exciting upcoming events to share with you. So the first is our CloudSuite Bootcamp that we'll be hosting in RPI's sunny Tampa office toward the end of January, where you'll learn directly from our implementation consultants about the ins and outs of Infor CloudSuite, featuring topics such as security role management, IDM output, system architecture, and burst reporting, which has definitely been a hot topic recently. So if you're on CloudSuite and want to learn more about administering the system, if you're on Infor V10 or another ERP and are curious about moving, or if you're just passively interested but want to spend a few days in January geeking out over technical topics, this event is perfect for you. And if you're curious, visit rpic.com/CloudSuite Bootcamp to learn more about it.
And last but certainly not least, early next year, end of February, beginning of March, we have RPI's inaugural Infor HCM Road Mapping Festival. And we've been involved a little bit in the planning of this, and it is looking like it's going to be awesome. So our kind of tagline for this is learn, share, play. And that's really what it's going to be about. So we'll have VIP road mapping sessions, hands-on training. There are going to be featured speakers and breakout sessions, CloudSuite HCM sandboxes, so you can really get in there yourself, play around, get your hands dirty, nightly activities, so just fun opportunities to socialize, kind of let off some steam and have a good time. The play part here is just as important as learning and sharing, you know, and it will also put you in contact with, you know, your peers, maybe in other industries, maybe in your same industry, but, you know, these opportunities to come together and learn from what other organizations are doing, and to learn from your expert partner when it comes to Infor HCM, really invaluable, and we're looking forward to it. So you can learn more about that and check out the details on registering at rpic.com/HCM Festival. And that is everything that we had for you today. So we hope you learned a little or learned a lot. We really appreciate you being here, and we're always happy for these opportunities to you know, connect with our partners and share more about change management, because Daniel and I obviously feel passionate about this topic. Thanks so much. Hope you all enjoy your holidays.